Bienvenidos al Primo Cinco de Pablo Catalina, presented by Texas Beef House. By the way, almost bilingual. Almost. This close, this close. I can understand Spanish very well. I don't speak it very well, as you just heard there. But this is Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Make sure that you use our promo code SICK'EM10 when you make your first order for 10% off. Top 5 new offensive coordinators who hold the head coach's job in their hands. Number 5. Oops. See, today it's going too fast. Yesterday it was going too slow. Jake Spavital at Baylor. His impact on this roster this season cannot be overstated, because if they don't start scoring points and being fun on offense, then Dave Aranda is probably in some trouble. Even though Mack Rhodes has told us countless times that's not at all in his thought process. But if Baylor fails to make a bowl again, then the heat's going to get turned up on Dave Aranda. And Dave Aranda has taken over the defensive side himself, essentially. But the offensive side stays with Jake Spavital, and he's bringing in a new system. He's making it more like it was back when Baylor won multiple conference titles. So we'll see how that works. They brought in a whole bunch of new talent. There is still concerns on the offensive line, especially considering how deep into the portal window they kept trying to get guys to help that depth along the front. But if he can improve that even a little bit, and they can start making plays, especially with playmakers on the outside, that's going to make the offense a lot better, and we'll probably get Baylor to a bowl game. They just need to be 15% better than they were last year, and they're going to go to a bowl game. As bad as last year was, they had spots where if they had schematically the right system for their players and just some better decisions, they probably at least go 6-6, if not a little bit better than that. Number 4, Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State. You say, Paul, how does he hold his own life in his hand? Well, he is also the offensive coordinator. So, since he's the new OC and the offensive coordinator, Mississippi State's success in his career holds solely in his hands. Really, I should maybe be doing this for the defensive coordinator on that side of the ball, on the other side of the ball, but I just thought this was interesting, as one of the new offensive coordinators in the country is Jeff Lebby, and he holds his own offensive fortunes in his own hands. So while it's the first year, you know, he's probably not going to get run out, but still, that's probably going to be true as long as he's the offensive coordinator. I just thought it was weird and wanted to throw him on the list. I think he'll do fine, but again, we'll see. Number 3, Andy Kotelnicki at Penn State. Now you say, Paul, James Franklin's one of the best head coaches in the country. He's never really questioned. Penn State is thrilled with him, but offensively, they are one of the most bland teams in the country. Now, we'll get to the most bland team in the country in a second. Don't worry about that. I think you all know who number 1 is going to wind up being. But James Franklin had some heat come down on him this year off the field when it came out that he had been interfering with the medical staff and had to pay out on a lawsuit. Andy Kotelnicki comes in to make people forget about those slight little off-the-field transgressions that don't really mean much if you're winning, but if you're constantly losing to Ohio State and Michigan and teams in bowl games that are more offensively diverse than you, then you're going to have a problem. Andy Kotelnicki comes in, he'll install the wide zone into the Penn State offense, and hopefully for the Lions, they can roll on through and start scoring some points and winning some games that they're not picked to win. That's been their problem. They're kind of the Texas A&M of the Big Ten right now. I'm not wrong. I'm going to tell you. I think that's a very fair comparison. Garrett doesn't have his headset on, but I think it's a fair comparison.
Haven't thought about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense. I'll give you that.
Tons of hype. Everybody expects something from them.
The quarterback.
But when it comes down to them making the move and winning the conference, James Franklin doesn't really do that. He's just a more open-minded coach, and I know after all that happened with the doctors this offseason, that probably falls on deaf ears. But as far as adjusting things, for example, bringing in Andy Kotelnicki to run the offense and sending Mike Yurcich out. Number 2, Chip Kelly at Ohio State. Now, this is a home run hire. I think this is going to work out well for everybody. Ohio State is loaded, but if they lose to Michigan for a 4th year in a row And if they lose to Michigan because they didn't score enough points, then I think Ryan Day, that teeth's going to get turned up slowly and slowly and slowly. So if they lose to Michigan, they better win the national championship to make people forget about that. But if they lose to Michigan and then don't do well in the playoffs, in spite of everything that they've done this year, the heat is going to continually get turned up on Ryan Day because that's what they're out there to do, and you can't just keep losing to Michigan, and you can't lose in the playoff. He has pressure on him. Now, he's not in any imminent danger, but if bringing Chip Kelly in as the offensive coordinator does not work the way that they want it to, and it may not have worked with Bill O'Brien, we don't know, but if that doesn't work, then I do think he's on the hot seat more than a coach with his outstanding record that anybody else in the country would be thrilled with would be. Because, again, his losses are pretty much just to Michigan and a couple of randos out there and, a Missouri team after a bunch of opt-outs in the bowl game. I'm not knocking Mizzou by any stretch of the imagination, but bottom line, it's a different time for him. Number 1. You could also entitle this Durr, Paul. Obviously, it's Iowa, Tim Lester. Now, Kirk Ferentz has earned the right, by most estimations, to go out the way he wants to. Except college football doesn't really work like that. The minute that you get bland, the minute that you get behind, the go out how you want to kind of goes away. And Iowa is entering a new Big Ten. They're still in the Big Ten, obviously. They didn't leave. But the Big Ten is changing all around them. You're adding teams like Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, all of whom will have wide-open offenses. Purdue is trying to make their wide-open offense even more wide open. Nebraska should be getting better with Matt Rule. A lot of things have changed around Iowa, and Iowa has not changed with them because nothing has forced them to change. But how long can you put up with getting right on the cusp of winning the conference and not doing it because the other teams are so much better on offense than you are on defense? Last year's game against Michigan should have been an absolute eye-opener for all Iowa fans. Look, you can win 13-9 a whole bunch of times during the regular season, but when it comes down to it, when you have to be able to score with the team to keep up with them and rely on that great defense to make plays in spots as opposed to carry the whole game, they couldn't do it against a more athletically gifted team. Tim Lester comes in to try to make that happen at Iowa, but things have gotten harder in what is now an 18-team conference, and nobody's going to sit around and wait for Kirk Ferentz, which means to me, having seen this multiple times, saw it with Mac Brown and Will Muschamp, and neither of those guys wound up being the head coach of Texas after a while. Saw it with Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Bowden. It happens a lot where you have a succession plan and you think these are the way things are going to go because you've been the guy for a long time and you've won a lot of games. And Kirk Ferentz has certainly done that. But football is changing around him. And if you go 9-3 in this conference and your 3 losses to the best teams, you are not going to make the playoff as Iowa. Iowa will not have that kind of street cred to get in over a 9-3 team in the SEC or a second 9-3 team that scores more points in the Big Ten. That will be where things divide when they're picking the top 12. Honestly, who would you rather have? A 9-3 Iowa who's lost to all the good teams they've played, or a 9-3, say, Miami team who's lost to Clemson, Florida State, and, say, a Notre Dame in 1 year? I would probably rather have a 9-3 Miami team with a Cam Ward. I don't think Miami plays Notre Dame this year, but you get my point. That, to me, is what's going to start happening. And even though they're the Big Ten and they've got this big backing behind them, would you rather have them at 9-3 or USC at 9-3? If it comes down to it, I bet you they're picking USC and not Iowa, given the fact that they know what happens when Iowa plays somebody who is more athletic than them. The proof's in the pudding. So Kirk Ferentz's style works when you play teams from the frozen north. It does not work when you play teams that move and have athletes like Ohio State and Michigan State back in the day, Wisconsin at their peak, really always kind of beat them. He's got to get ahead, and Tim Lester holds that in his hands. Tim Lester holds that in his hands, and if he can bring something to Iowa and get Cade McNamara and that offense going, it will be something to watch because that defense is always going to be lethal. That's it for the top 5. We're here to wrap it up.